Hello and welcome to the Manifestor Only podcast. Today I have 2-5 Splenic Manifestor, Emmy. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I am so excited to have you here. It was one of my followers who was like, "Oh, you need to have Emmy on your podcast. I actually didn't know you existed." And so grateful that that person reached out and told me about you. Because after scrolling through your page for a couple of hours, I was just like, yes, I need to have this person on my podcast. So, would you like to introduce yourself in the way that feels most natural to you?
Sure. I love that invitation. Thank you, Jessica. So I'm Emmy. My last name's Hosotsuji for anyone who reads my name and doesn't know how to pronounce. I am based in Toronto, Canada, and I'm about almost 3 years into my human design journey. I used to be in lots of different things in my career. I was involved in working in the public sector, in innovation. So I was working for not necessarily the government, but I was an arm's length away from the government. And then before that, I was in community development, working with low-income neighborhoods in my city, and particularly working with youth and leadership. So this kind of common theme around working with people and working with systems and how people work together to make our lives and our world a better place is kind of the common thing that strings through my career, even though it looks like I'm jumping all over the place. And yeah, I've got this invitation from Jessica, and I'm just so pleased to be here with you and to chat manifestor to manifestor. And to also chat about maybe the differences that come up in our designs. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I think it's so fascinating with the splenic manifestor, and I bet we'll get into the whole authority thing, but I would love for us to start on a topic that you shared a reel about high performance. And for me, I didn't know this at the time, but now looking at your chart, you have a defined ego. And the whole consensus, and I'm doing this with the bunny ears for anybody not seeing that, is that, the willpower can be high performers. But you had a take on this whole high performance thing that just drew me in. And so I would love to hear your perspective on that. And let's just start the conversation there.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I always love any opportunity for my channel of judgment and critique to come in immediately because I'm like, I kind of love doing that. Um, but it did come out of me scrolling through LinkedIn and seeing some infographic about like 9 different signs of a high performer. And, this person that posted it was posting in favor of it, in support that this is the type of person that you should hire. These are the people that should get promoted on your team, and you should invest in them because they're high performers. And I just immediately rolled my eyes at that post because there's something about that felt really icky, and it felt really constrained, and it felt like you're not you, Jessica, but you as in like the people who are creating this are tightly defining with such specificity of like what a quote unquote good worker is in the corporate world. And it just made me feel so icky, especially because especially coming from human design and understanding the science of differentiation and that we're all unique and that we all have different gifts to offer to any team, any household, any contribution into the community. But even before I found human design, I felt the same way because I think I knew that I don't show up and contribute to teams the same way everybody else seems to. And I think we all kind of feel that, especially as manifestors, because we do kind of feel like we're different. So regardless of knowing your human design, knowing that you are gifted and that you have some things to offer, but that doesn't come out the same way as other people, like that's kind of the main message that I like sharing. And I like to share that particularly on LinkedIn because it's such that's the platform for work and corporate culture and things like that, getting jobs and, promoting what you do in your job and all that. So I think I just went on a little bit of a rant there on my reel about how unhelpful and unhealthy that is for so many people. The largest organization I've ever worked for was, I think we had 150 staff. So that's not that big. I know a lot of people who work in corporations that have thousands of workers. But even in that context, you can see how the work culture shapes people's experience and even their level of confidence in how they show up at work. Who does get promoted, right? Who does get the opportunity to go to that big event or that big conference? Like it just, I think it's a disservice to the staff and employees that work at a company, but I think it's also a disservice in the end to the company's mission. Because whatever the company's purpose and mission is, and I'm including public sector and I'm including the nonprofit charitable sector, like any organization, in the end, you're not actually leveraging the true gifts that everyone has. And you're saying, we will only achieve this goal if we get there this way, in this very specific way. And that's not true. But I think so many leaders aren't willing to take that risk, I think.
I think it's so damaging. You know, like you said, the strategy of an organization, be it private or whatever the other word is.
Public?
Public, yes, thank you. My Norwenglish came in there and was just like, brain fart, can't remember, private or public. No matter private or public sector, it's like you want to leverage, like you said, the gifts of the employee. And some people are going to see things differently, going to work differently. And, you know, I shared this with you how I come from a long background of the coaching industry. I got my coaching education and certification in 2013 to 2014. So it's a decade ago. I was like a certified coach. And so I've been living in this world of Tony Robbins and Boss Babe and Brendan Burchard. And I remember, you know, it came to me when I was watching your reel how I purchased, you know, and there's no shame to anybody who is a high performer. I just want to put that out there. If you recognize yourself in those 9 things on a list saying that this is a high performer, then great. That's amazing. I love that for you. And not everybody is that. And so I bought these journals. They were these daily journals from Brendan Burchard called The High Performer. And it was intense how much I was supposed to write in that thing every single day. And, you know, I would sit down and I'd be so excited and be like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'd write all the dates in every single day. And then as the manifestor I am, inconsistently consistent, I would do it for 3 days and then I wouldn't do it for 3 weeks. And then I'd come back to it and this enormous guilt and shame for not being able to keep up, not being able to be that person that this industry was portraying that you had to be to get anywhere in life. And I think that is so damaging to the soul, and especially for manifestors who are not here to be consistent in their energy. We ebb and flow. And when we do, you know, flow, it's on, you know, it's on like Donkey Kong, motherfuckers. It's like, let's go. But when we're ebbing, it's like, give me my couch, give me my TV series, give me my, you know, my shows and my chips and my candy, and I'll be okay for a couple of weeks. But that is not, you know, quote unquote, allowed in this coaching and performance industry, and also then in the corporate world. And so right now I'm doing these HR studies, and it truly is an ends to a mean where I so hope and wish that there will be a day where I am initiating human design into the HR world, where leaders can learn about their employees' design and really understand it and leverage it. Because what a beautiful world wouldn't that be?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, do you have any, well, being a manifestor with this inconsistent energy, now you do have the defined will, so you have the ability to push through on will alone. But I'm hoping and assuming that you have some kind of story where you just felt like, I can't keep up. Is that something you're
Yeah.
willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, right? The defined heart is not as sustainable as a defined sacral, right? So it's short and punchy energy. And I have certainly witnessed myself have short and punchy energy. When I was working in the nonprofit sector and in community development, we used to run workshops and events and conferences and gatherings all the time. So those kind of short, punchy, there's a clear start date, there's a clear end date of running an event. That's when my defined will center would get into gear and would say, all right, we're going to put on the best event for our participants and our guests, and it's going to look like this, and we got to buy those things and print the materials and, all this stuff. But then after an event, it was always wrecked, like done, train wreck, do not talk to me for 2 weeks. I am unavailable, and so I remember being in that kind of cycle all the time where people would start saying, like, let's not run an event where we intend to crash after. Like, let's start planning and designing the event so that we're actually managing our energy and that we don't crash after. And there was something about that for me that felt like wrong or misaligned for my energy, to be honest. It felt like my defined heart was designed for that. Like when I think back on it, it's like, yeah, but I just get revved up. That's just the nature of my defined heart energy. And so then I am going to crash a little bit after. And the crashing it wasn't crashing to the point where I was like getting sick or like things were really wrong, but it was crashing to the point where I was like, yeah, I don't want to talk to anyone for 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm going to order in a lot of food. I'm going to watch my shows, as you said earlier. And that didn't feel unhealthy to me. Um, so I think that knowing, and then really learning my human design and understanding that the defined heart does have this short bursts of energy and that it does need lots of rest and periods of rest. That just felt really confirming and validating for me that, okay, that's the nature of my energy. But if I were to, let's say, join an event management company and like do events like every week or something, I could not sustain that. There's no way I could sustain that. So, maybe once a month, even hosting an event I could do, especially because I had help. I never did it alone. Um, but yeah, I think my experience even of working 9 to 5s, right? As manifestors, we often hear that in human design, like the 9 to 5 corporate structure or work schedule, 5 day schedule, sorry, 5 days a week doesn't really work or is aligned with manifestors. There is, of course, exceptions. I do know manifestors that can do a 9 to 5, 5 days a week. They're in their environment matches from their human design. They do have a lot of creative freedom. They do have a certain power and influence in that work or job. So it works for them, right? It's just that we know that a majority of the organizations out there tend not to give manifestors specifically that type of role or just don't have that kind of work culture that's that flexible. Um, so, I think understanding my human design and knowing, okay, I don't have a defined sacral. Yes, I have a defined will, but it's short and punchy and it has to be tied to something that I actually like or want to do. Because if it isn't, I don't have energy for it. If my boss tells me to do something and they're like, well, you did so well on that last event, can you do another event? I'd be like, but this event, I don't want to do this particular event. And I would have my own reasons for whatever, maybe I think it's not a strategic move, or maybe I think it's the wrong timing, or whatever it is. But if I just personally don't have the investment of my defined will slash ego slash heart center, then yeah, I can't draw upon that energy. It's literally not there in my body. So that's another thing to remember, I guess. Yeah. Mhm.
Yes, so important. I mean, that will and your will is defined from the spleen to the heart for anybody wondering. And so it really makes sense that you're like, yeah, I'll use my energy on making sure the tribe is okay for this workshop, for this event, for this whatever. And then just like, no, I'm done. I've done my work, let me rest. And then I'm really interested in, you're a 2-5, which is like that double projection field. And how has learning about your profile also helped you, in your world of working or just understanding yourself better?
Yeah, I think that's been a really, really, I think like the first phase of learning about being a manifestor was like life changing. And then learning about being a 2-5 was equally life changing. Um, Particularly the 5, because the 5 I think is a bit more juicy. Um, it can bring about a lot of challenge for anyone who's a 5 line. Um, in the work context, and throughout my career, I've seen how the projections come to the 5 line as we learn in human design. And I have received so many projections about what I'm supposed to deliver, what I'm supposed to be good at, what my pace of work is supposed to be, what my interests and curiosities even are supposed to be. There's been interesting circumstances where I'll show up to an event, let's say, and people say, "Oh, I didn't expect you to be here. I didn't know that you cared about this." And I'd be like, "What would make you think that? Like, I have no idea where you would pick up the signs or the clues that I wouldn't be interested in this thing." And that's one out of a bajillion examples of like the projection and types of projections that come. But one vital lesson that I've had to learn is how to manage expectations when it comes to work. Particularly, I think when money is involved, because people can get really angry fast when it comes to, "But I paid you this money, or I pay you this salary. You should have done this, or you should have done it by this time, or this is how I expected you to do it." That's where I've had some tension for sure in previous workspaces. Not that they've never gotten resolved. I've been able to resolve all of them, but it ends up in the end, I reflect back and realize I didn't inform what I said I would do and exactly how I would do it and exactly what they should expect from me. I kept that to myself, and so you learn about the lessons of the importance of informing as a manifester. And that's really helped me to navigate the 5 line projection experience. And I think that there's also this nature of being a manifester, regardless of if you have a 5 line, that people say like, "Whoa, you're so powerful. How can I use that manifester energy for my benefit, right? Or for
Oh.
my mission?" So we then become some sort of used cog for them. And it's like, that's why it's so important for us to use that authority to be like, "Yeah, no, that's not what I'm here for."
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yes.
yeah.
That part right there. People using our initiation power for their benefit. And, I shortly, when I found human design and with my undefined ego being, the biggest center for me to decondition and to really understand that my not self always speaks through that undefined ego, always. I was, as a second line, because I'm a 6-2, you're a 2-5, it's that people will call us out, right? And so I would always get called out to do different things like, "Oh, you could be amazing at this." And the different projection fields, I kind of say the second line is, "Oh, you could do this." The fifth line is, "Oh, you should be this." Right. And so for me, it's just like, "Oh, you could do this and you would be amazing at this. And oh, I think you would be so great at this." And then I would use all my power on making sure that I would prove to them that, "Yeah, I'm great at this. I'm good at this. You're right. Can you please give me the recognition and making sure that I know that I did the perfect job for you." Right. But I would love to hear, this, you were in on a little bit of the subject of being able to resolve those expectations that people would, put you on the pedestal to be like, "Oh, this is what you're going to deliver." And then it would be different. But having that undefined solar plexus and, the not self of the solar plexus of being afraid of truth and confrontation, how's that shown up for you in those situations?
Yeah, definitely it was a learning curve because I did naturally, not like confrontation. Um, but I think it comes with experience really and just practice. I would practice at home before I would go talk to my boss the next morning, right? I would write it out, everything that I needed to say, or I would say it to myself in the mirror, or I would ask my partner, "Hey, can I talk this out with you first?" Um, and I think what helped too is like just being honest about all my fears around how I might fuck this up, right? How I might hurt their feelings or upset them, or they might be upset with me and then fire me, like the worst case scenarios that would go through my head. Just talking it out with someone allows me to see the reality of things and allows me to see, like, okay, if I can face that, potentially they're going to be upset with me. And then what's the worst that could happen after that? And after that, that allows me to just sit with the fear, again, being a splenic authority, hold the hand of fear and still walk through and say, hey, boss, this is the situation. I now understand that you expected X and I was planning on Y, and now we're at Z. So let's just talk this out. And for future reference, right? Like planning for the future next project or whatever it is, this is what I would do. This is what I would expect. And even sharing things like, I tend to do this, or I tend to like having a work back schedule, or, just informing again about how I work is something that I really had to learn. Like, I really did not do that at the beginning of my career. um, yeah, I think that's so funny. I don't know why it's funny. I just think it's like informing to me is so funny because it's like so obvious for other people. Like they're like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you tell people that? And I'm like, I don't know.
I hear you so clearly on this. Oh my gosh. I, when I started my human design whole experiment and really went deep into like, okay, I'm gonna try this on, like Ra would say, don't trust me, go figure it out, see if it's true, test the mechanics. And this was around, 2020. I was insane and I was running a restaurant as a restaurant manager in the middle of the freaking pandemic.
Oh,
Do not do that, anybody. If there ever is another pandemic, get out of the restaurant industry if that happens. It was awful. But I was like, okay, I'm in this whole experiment thing. I'm a manifestor. I have this closed aura. Nobody can read me. I came to human design and was like, of course people can read me. I'm an open book. What are you talking about? I'm a warm, fuzzy hug. But then the more, I wanted to be the generator. Hello. But the more I would like actually kind of detach myself from the situation and observe it, it was like, holy shit, they do not read me. And I remember so clearly there was one time at work where the stupid printer it wasn't working. And I had been for days, I've been trying to figure out why this stupid machine won't work. And this is like the machine that tells the kitchen what to make. It's like, this is important shit. We can't be running back and forth to the kitchen with handwritten notes every single time on a Friday night when it's a full house. We cannot do this.
yeah.
And so I was so stressed and I thought I had figured it out. And my maitre d' calls me and he's like, dude, I'm sorry. I know this is your weekend off, but it is still not working and I don't know what to do. And I lived very close to the place. I just ran down and I was fuming. I was so, you disturbed my peace, motherfucker. It's like, oh, I was supposed to have the weekend off. I thought I'd figured this out. And so I just rushed behind the bar and I'm just standing there, like doing my thing in my little bubble. And then I'm like, have this little ding, 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 ding. Pay attention. What's going on? And then I like kind of look up and I look to my right and the head chef is standing there frozen. And in front of me, the maitre d' is frozen. And they're just both looking at me like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I'm just like, oh, okay. So I'm mad at the machine. I'm mad at the system. You guys have done nothing wrong. There is absolutely nothing that you have done to cause this anger. I love you. You guys are great. I'm only mad at the machine. And I mean, their shoulders were just like, oh, they relaxed. And then they just went back to work. And I was just like, wow, they cannot read me. I need to inform. It was so impactful for me to notice that and to be in that situation and just see the reaction of just this frozen deer in headlights, kind of like, what do I do? You know, because my energy was just out there. Just in that, I have the 1222. I was not in the mood to be there to fix this. You know, I was
Right.
in the mood to watch reruns of the OC with my popcorn. And it was life changing. And so I also was like, okay, I gotta nail this freaking informing thing down. And there was one point where, and I went to the bathroom, like just went to the bathroom, and I'm married to a wonderful manifesting generator,
Cool.
and we've been married forever. It's a long love story. And so
Oh.
at this point we were living in Greece and we were living in this really tiny apartment. And so I went to the bathroom and then suddenly I hear him like, Jess, where are you? And I'm sitting and I'm peeing and I'm like, dude, there are 4 rooms in this apartment and you can see all of them except one because the door is shut. Where do you think I am?
I think I've had the exact same scenario happen to me.
It's hilarious how small or big it can be, right?
I'm really curious for your journey. Like, what inspired you to get into HR? Like, restaurant business, very different from going into HR or at least studying HR. What was the journey there?
Yeah. Well, my whole background, I mean, like I said, I did the coaching degree and I also took a mindfulness degree that same year. So it was like a year of coaching and a year of mindfulness.
Mm.
And I really wanted to do something about that. But a decade ago, mindfulness, at least in Norway, where I live, it was woo woo AF. I mean, today, you know, they brought mindfulness into school. Coaching is a part of every single, you know, big corporation. It's like, this is what we do. But as a true manifestor, I was just way before my time. And so it wasn't easy for me to do my own business. And so I fell back into the restaurant industry. But I've always been in the restaurant industry in some way, shape, or form. And I've always had a leadership role. I mean, 6'2" profile, personality sun, gate 22. It's just this natural leadership, being called out to be a leader. I just always would fall into being the restaurant manager, being the general manager. You know, at the end, I was running my own franchise as a coffee shop. And so I would love to jump over the schooling of what I've already done because it is HR. It is managing personnel and making sure that people have what they need. You know, I also have that 1949, which is like, I'm going to make sure that the tribe has what they need. It is so important for me. And unfortunately, we still live in a world that wants me to have a little piece of paper that proves that I know what I'm talking about. So it was a big journey of like this past year. Like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Undefined G. Where's my direction? What is my role? Where am I going? And it was just this serendipitous kind of experience of like, how I have inner vision as well. And just having this image of school, school, school. And I'm just like, dude, no. My mind was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But then I did. And I'm one semester in. I might only do a year. It's called a year study of HR and personnel management. That's what I'm doing right now. And I've talked to a few people who work in HR in big corporations, like one oil corporation and a different, you know, I guess you would call it a startup, but they've been a startup for 10 years. So they're really not a startup anymore, right? They're a big startup. So I talked to two different people just to get that information of like, if I do this year study with all the experience I have, with the experience of having 0% turnover in my coffee shop, having about 1.5% turnover when I was running the biggest restaurant, cocktail bar, and nightclub in the city I lived in. I mean, and these people were like, those are impressive numbers. How did you do that? I'm like, well, have the 1949 and the 1222 and just, be a
Mhm.
manifestor, initiate people, make sure that you get the right people on board and la 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 la. But I couldn't say that. So I was just like, I know natural talent. I know what I'm doing. I don't know how I can explain it.
Right.
And they're like, well, with that 1 year, with that study and the experience, you can probably get a job somewhere. So
Mhm.
we'll see. I don't feel like a bachelor is in my path, but I don't know yet. So yeah.
That's so fascinating. I love that. Thanks for sharing that story. I think you just like gave me a bit of an aha moment that because something that I've been grappling with the two line is that I guess our society doesn't necessarily see talent other than like artistic talent. Like if it's not visual or like auditory, like being a musician, then like what other kind of talent is there? But the two line has so many other talents that are not those specific things. And like, because one of the things that I've been pondering lately for myself is like, why do I feel the need, even with a defined heart, to feel like I'm supposed to get the paperwork or get the certifications or get the degrees to show what I'm actually already talented in? um Similar to what you've been sharing, and it's just like, is that a two line shadow, like that we do feel like we need to prove it, or is that just like we're just navigating the stupid world as it is? Like I don't know.
I think that's a great question. And it reminds me of when I was doing my analyst course with James Alexander. And he said something along the lines, and James, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the way you said this, but the way I heard it was if the world was open to differentiation, the second line wouldn't have to hide. We wouldn't have to
Mm.
hermit. But we hermit and we hide because the world is not okay with, like you said, what is talent? We think talent is the musicians, the dancers, the artists, the people who can move their body in a different way or use the instrument in some way. But talent is so much more than that. And for my experience, being that second line, it's like it is everything that I do well, and I cannot explain how I do it well. It's like when I'm reading a human design chart too, people will be like, oh my God, you're reading my soul. How do you do that? I'm like, I don't really know why or how, but I was drawn to this, or I was feeling like this was being called out, so yeah, there's definitely something there around having to prove what you know without being able to explain it. I was like, I don't know how I did what I did with the 1% and 0% turnover at those two different places. I just knew how to build a team. I just understood what was needed without the schooling to tell me how to do that. It was just
Mhm.
natural to me. So yeah,
Yeah, it's
definitely.
such an interesting line of thought because, like, I think when I think about human design in the context of organizations and corporate world, I think particularly about type first. Like, that's where my mind kind of goes is like, oh, different types, sacral and non-sacral. Definitely like, will center, like motor centers, amount of energy available. But then like thinking about this two line now and just, yeah, like how these talents show up in the workplace and how are they embraced? How much hiding or hermiting does the two line need to do while they're working somewhere? You know, I think that's such a fascinating line of thought around, yeah, the profile lines and how they show up and how they could be um cultivated and really embraced in workplaces. That's a really cool line of thought that now you've initiated me into. I'm going to start reflecting on that.
Love it. Yeah, I think the profile being the role that we're here to play, you know, in that corporate world, in the business world, it's like that does play such a big role. It's like, is it the 1-3? Okay, you better give them time I'm married to a 1-3. That's why I always go there. It's like I give him time to figure out his foundation.
Mm.
You know, we're I love when I can just suggest something to my husband and then he has a response. It is the best feeling in the world. And so I had this like, I want to have more pizza in my life, but I'm sick and tired of buying it. And so I know that he loves Michael Pollan, and I think that's his name. And he has like this a 4-part series on Netflix on like water, flour, fire, and some other element of baking. Have you seen that?
I think I've heard of it. And salt, maybe
Yeah,
something like
something
that.
like that. Yes, it is gorgeous. It's beautiful. And I was like, "Do you want to watch the flour one?" You know? And he's like, "Yeah, let's do that." And after that, he's just been like, okay, deep into the foundation of what is flour? How do I make something with flour? He ended up at a pizza course. I was just like, hallelujah, thank God. And so, like today, he made pizza.
Amazing.
And me as a second line, I'd just go in there and I just try to figure it out. I wouldn't really need that foundation. I'd just find out, am I a natural at this or am I not?
Hmm.
And like not rushing his process. And
Right.
so letting him build his foundation, shutting my mouth, shutting my gate 17 opinions. You know, I see you have that too. It's like, we can be opinionated. I can piss on your parade with all the logic facts, but I'm not going to. And just like, okay, you got this. And how beautiful wouldn't that be if we knew someone's role, someone's profile, and just like, oh, that's your process. I got it.
Yes. Oh, just like I particularly also like working in the public sector, I've seen the people who work at the same organization for 30 years, right? And they're like near retirement-ish. So they're like, no, I'm gonna stick it out. Like I'm staying here, got everything planned out, you know. Has this place probably ruined my confidence? Probably, yeah, a little bit. Do I feel seen by this organization? Definitely not. Have I ever even talked to the CEO? No, never. You know, like just the way that is particularly the public sector like attracts people who want the safety of a government job, who honestly, I think that's just the main thing. Safety of the salary, safety of, you know, not getting fired, maybe, safety of like regardless, because I particularly worked for the election body for our province. So we're always going to have elections unless something really radical happens. So, you know, that's like, it's not like it's going to go out of style or, you know, we're going to go bankrupt or anything like that. So, I mean, the type of people that I would see working in that office, I was like, oh my God, like I feel so much for so many of them because they don't feel seen. I don't even know if they feel seen outside of work, right? And it's just kind of like the way that it seeps into their own psyche of their self-esteem, how they see themselves, how it's showing up in their home life with their family. Like it just makes me feel so sad. And I think part of that was my inspiration of really getting into human design because I left that work to get into human design. Um, of just like how do we empower people with human design in personal life and workspaces, right? It can be so empowering. And I think in a way, you know, I was thinking about today how informing creates peace for manifestors. And I was thinking about how, you know, actually manifestors are initiating peace in spaces in general, right? Manifestors can initiate peace in a workplace, especially if we're doing something that's like genuinely seeing people. You know, maybe we leverage the projectors, but genuinely using things like human design to see people and let them be actually heard and embraced and like noticing the differences and embracing those differences. I just thought, oh, that's such a beautiful thought and like role and responsibility that manifestors can have in the workspace. And yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yes, I hope that any manifestors in the corporate world can initiate their bosses into understanding human design. Please and thank you.
Honestly, the whole world benefits from it.
But it does. And I think, you know, this is where our role is so important in society. It's like yes, we talk about how the manifestor is here to initiate something new, but I think that needs to be seen through the lens of we don't need to reinvent the wheel. That's not what new means. But
Mhm.
new for your workplace could be they don't know human design. Perhaps you can initiate that into some corporate fun, you know, what is it called? Team building experience, right?
Mhm.
Who knows? They might be super open to it, or you might be absolutely rejected. And that happens. And
Mhm.
so, on that note, I would really love to hear your experience with rejection. Do you have any stories there on being utterly rejected?
I'm trying to think of utterly rejected. I mean, I think I've been rejected on very systemic levels and then like very interpersonal levels. So also just to say rejection is like one of my deepest fears. Like it's like a very challenging area.
Same.
um I mean, I try to avoid being rejected at all possible costs. Like, and I know that that's not necessarily healthy, but I'm just admitting where I am right now. But yeah, I mean, I think some of the rejection that comes to mind right now is um meeting people like while shaking hands, like literally in the first seconds of meeting people and just being rejected. Like it's just, I didn't even say who I am or what I do, or we didn't even get to that. It's within the first few seconds, shaking hands. Hi, my name's Emmy. Oh, okay. And then they turn around and walk away. And I'm like, oh, okay. I thought we were going to have a conversation, but I guess not. So I feel a little rejected in those moments. And that's happened far more than once.
Mm.
And then there's like bigger systems level things like, I don't know, like cold calling people, usually cold emailing people for partnerships. I've probably done that maybe half a dozen times in my life where I've really thought about something, thought about an idea, a creative urge that I want to put out there, a project, maybe a small business, something that's like kind of, or even putting on an event together. And then I know the perfect person. And then I approach them and I either get no response at all, or I get like I don't know who the heck you are. Like, what makes you think that this would align with me? Like, it's like so harsh of a rejection. And I'm always like, what? That's okay. I initiated when I think, I mean, this is before human design too, right? I'm reflecting like, well, I initiated, I've been watching their work for years, so I feel like it's aligned, but somehow my energy just they just didn't like it. So, or have like applied for grants and gotten rejected, even though I like met every single possible criteria and I thought this is perfect alignment, still get rejected. Um, yeah, but it's such a hard experience, I think, for manifestors in particular. And yeah, I think it's interesting when you think about kind of tougher industries, like, I don't know, I can't name one, but like tough where you have to have a tough skin, where people reject you all the time, like perhaps in sales, kind of jobs. That's like, I don't know any specific manifestors that are in sales, but like that would be tough, I would think.
Oh, rejection is such a core wound. It is so, I have to just like take a moment here because it's still one of my biggest fears. And I don't think that fear will ever be completely gone. I think that it gets easier with time to understand that it's not personal. I'm an emotional manifester, so our processes will be different, but that doesn't mean that the feeling of being rejected is utterly devastating.
Yeah.
Because underneath this closed aura is a fucking puppy dog that just wants you to understand that I just want to be loved. I'm just trying to make the world a better place in somehow, way, or shape, or form, you know? And my emotional process, it always starts in a victim role. And so this incredibly victim role of they did this to me. They are, you know, awful. They have done this. And then it goes from there into some more clarity around how, well, I could have worded myself differently. I could have done this and that differently. But then again, ends up with this was exactly the experience I needed because where I'm going to face rejection. And so being able then to have grace for that person's process of being like, oh, okay, I see how you saw what you saw. I can have grace for the way you saw me. I can have an understanding for me being a villain in your story. And that's only going to make me stronger. And it doesn't mean that going to the depths of fucking despair when the rejection happens feels any easier or better or in any way is comfortable.
Right.
Absolutely not. And I think that's something that, you know, as manifestors, it is a part of our journey. It is a part of what's going to happen. And rejection doesn't mean that the initiation is wrong.
Right.
I think that is a really key part. It doesn't mean that anything is incorrect, to use, you know, human design jargon. It just means that person was not ready to get on board with what you're doing. And that's okay, but it's painful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So painful. Yeah. And I can imagine being an emotional person that is a journey, like much more of it's a process, it's a journey for you that maybe lingers a bit longer. Like for me, it certainly hurts, and maybe I, mumble about it in my head for a couple days, and maybe it'll pop up in the following weeks ever so often, but it's not something that I'm like mulling over and like working through in my body for maybe weeks. I don't know how long it, generally is, but
Oh, yeah, it's been a month now since it happened. It's a process, man. It's a process. And, you know, of course, everybody's going to be different, but I have two waves. I have that 1949 and then the 1222. And so there's a lot going on. And then without going too deep into the whole, you know, human design system, but the emotional solar plexus is very much connected to the mind. And so there is this mind fuck going on through that emotional process and this anxiety of everything that went wrong and everything that could have, should have, would have happened if I just, and then just going back into the body, going back into that process and allowing myself to feel, okay, where did this rejection start? You know, it's that person has reopened this wound. It is now bleeding as a waterfall and then going down into the depths of the core. And, you know, for me, that's like, okay, I moved from the States when I was right before I turned 7. And so I moved from the States, which is very much, at least when I was growing up, it was like, it was okay to be bold. It was somewhat okay to be loud. Wasn't too okay to be emotional. I had a lot of non-emotional people around me and no judgment to them. But there was this, you know, different societal norms about, you know, being the best, being the biggest, being the greatest. And me being allowed to explore that in certain capacities, but then moving to Norway, the stoic, stone cold, stone faced, There is no, and we also have what's called tall poppies. It's called,
Syndrome?
yeah, syndrome.
Oh,
Yes. Tall
okay.
poppy syndrome. Yeah. Which is where, the poppies grow, but then you cut off the top of the poppies because nobody's supposed to grow taller than the other kind of thing. In Norway, we call it the law of jante. It's like you
Okay.
cannot be better than anybody else. You are the same as everything else. You are, you're not allowed to be anything but this A4 piece of paper.
Yeah.
And that was painful because, I remember, but this was one part of the process of being rejected a month ago where I've had to go through that memory. I also have gate 47 for anybody listening. It's like that is a really fucking hard gate to have because it's like the self-oppressed, looking to the past, having all these images just pop up all the time and feeling oppressed when it's like, no, you're not actually oppressed, but you're just binding yourself to this oppression. It's okay. But I have this fear of futility and nothing's worth anything and I'm not worth anything and then throw in the undefined ego. And so going to that core of like, okay, but this is where I really as a child felt that rejection.
Mhm.
And then being able to see it wasn't that person that rejected me that created this open wound. It was actually just, it's already here. It's already
Right.
in me. So that's a little peek into the emotional process.
Yeah, that's like I said, it's a lot. It's a lot. There's so much going on there. Oh, I have so much empathy. And like also the 47. Yeah, that's such a I don't have it, but I've seen it play out for people and it's a tough one. It's a really tough one.
It's a part of my incarnation cross. It is my personality earth.
Oh, it is. I
It
see that
is.
now. Oh man.
And anybody listening who has the 46, no, excuse me, 47.6, so the line 6 of the gate 47, I feel you, I hear you, I give you a virtual big hug because it is the hardest gate to have activated in the full chart in that line. Because everything's futile, nothing's worth anything. But then, when we look at like you have a defined head in ajna, right? You have that connection to this logical understanding and wanting to find the answers. And I think, I was just at a tiny event with some people where we were talking about human design, and there was this girl named Edith there who reminded me that the mind, the head and the mind, or the crown and the ajna, it's for other people. I know this, but I forget it. And she's like, so the oppression that you've experienced is for other people, so that when they come to you with the oppression, then you know what it's like. And I'm like, oh, yes,
Mm.
I know this, but it's so hard to remember that in the moment. Right?
Yeah. Especially if you're identifying as the victim in the beginning of your process. It's hard to remember that this is for someone else. Like I'm wise right now. Like
Exactly. Oh my gosh, it's insane. Oh, but that core wound of rejection, I think all manifestors really struggle with that in some way, shape, or form. And like you said, the splenic process is going to be different. Um, but you guys have, I mean, of course, the solar plexus is also an awareness center, so there's a lot of fears going on there. But you have these survival fears, and you have 5 defined gates in your spleen, 5 out of 7, and you have 3 channels from your spleen, one to the root, one to the throat, and one to the ego. And so how does fear show up for you? I mean, of course, we also have the fears in the ajna, but I would love to hear if you've experienced anything around understanding those fears of the splenic center and what that looks like.
yeah, I think I'm actually really starting to think about the gate 48 and the gate 28 that I have defined because they're hanging gates. And I can see how I'm, grabbing onto the other side and trying to complete the energy, and it's just not completing because I just don't have that energy. But, but the fears are interesting to me here too, because perhaps because of the channel transmission too, but I think often about how it ties in with my five line and like how my fears of survival are often fears um of being burned at the stake. And that is tied to my survival of being able to get another job, my survival of having a network of people that I could go to if something were to happen, with my reputation, or something were to physically happen to me, or I fall ill. Like I do think often about these survival fears, around health, around safety, around networks that I can rely on. Um, I dream about moving to the countryside, and yet I'm still kind of afraid of moving to the countryside because, again, of safety. And like, I'm not the most outdoorsy person. Like I hike, but like I don't know how to build a fire. I don't know how to like shoot a gun. I don't know like I barely even know what poison ivy looks like, which I really should know. But all these things really do, they're like filtering through my mind all the time. Like I think about them all the time.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so yeah, it's very present in how I navigate life and how I make decisions because it is my authority. Um And I think the concept of make a decision and move forward, particularly when it scares you, like the more scary the decision is, it probably means it's the right way to go. That concept is sometimes I can really feel it and I can move into it with a lot of courage. And then sometimes I'm like, no, I think it means that I'm not supposed to go that way, and I kind of like, uh, yeah, freak myself out, I guess. Um, but the key with me is really my 57-20 and that kind of intuition that I'm meant to rely on and I'm designed to align myself with, and trusting that when I'm afraid, my intuition will give me the answer to navigate the fears. Um, Being the quietest voice, and it is certainly very quiet, it's challenging to hear it, because the fears are so much louder than my intuition and my wisdom. So it's a real process to quiet the noise and get myself into a meditation. Or sometimes I find, even just washing dishes, like I get so much, or stretching, I get a lot of my intuitive voice coming through. So it is a balance. It's the balance of those voices, the fears, freaking out, with my intuition being like, calm down, we've got this. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the spleen is such a fascinating authority. I have not too many splenic manifestors on this podcast, but I have a few of them. And, you know, one thing that I always like to ask, and you might not have the answer, is how does the splenic know, or the splenic, yes, but we tend to learn that the spleen says no more than yes. How is that, like a physical sensation? Is it a smell? Is it like the hairs on your arms? I mean, do you have like a connection to what that feels like for you?
That's such a good question. And it might again be different for different people, but for me, um, the most common and most frequent is hearing the voice. Like I literally hear a voice talking to me, saying whatever it is I'm supposed to do. Like, don't go in here, don't trust this person. It's usually don't do something, right? Like you said, in the negative. Um, but ever so often there is a piece of information that it just gives me. So it'll just say, I have a particularly interesting experience that I don't know what to do with it, but I've had three occasions in my life, since I was about 8 years old, that the voice, or a voice, whatever, tells me when someone is going to pass away. And it's usually within a month they pass away. So my first experience was when I was 8 years old. It was my grandfather on my paternal side, and he was on his deathbed, and we said, okay, well, we're all just sitting here kind of I guess, waiting for it to happen. And my dad said, we're going to go watch a movie. And I was like, what? That's right now? Like, we're going to go watch a movie at the movie theater? And I think my dad was like, if we stay here, he's trying to stay and, carry on. But if we leave, then he may say, okay, this is my moment. I get to leave now in peace. So we went to the movie theater, and I forget what movie we watched, but I remember during the movie sitting beside my dad and having my whole spine, my whole spinal column, just it felt like a huge light and energy just like what just yeah, like wafted into my body. And I literally stood up because all the hairs on my back just stood up, and it was like I got cold all of a sudden. And I looked at my dad because the information was that my grandfather passed in that very moment. And I looked at my dad like, did you feel that too? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was just like, I think grandpa just died. And he was like, okay. Like, he doesn't know what to think of it. So I just kept watching the movie. And then, we went back to his house and he did pass during the movie. So I've had 3 of these instances. The other 2 were just a voice that said, this person standing in front of you is going to pass. And that's the voice. And I'm like, okay. Like it doesn't tell me anything beyond that. Why, when, nothing. So that's a interesting experience that I have. And I don't quite know, again, like I said, what to do with it. And maybe there's nothing I'm supposed to do with it. It just is. But that's just an example of like how the spleen talks to me is often vocal. I guess not vocal, but verbal. Like I can hear the voice. Yeah. So for me, it's mostly that probably 1 out of 10 times it's a physical feeling for me. Yeah. Where it's just like a physical knowing. I don't hear any words. It's just in my gut. It's just like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that incredibly vulnerable gift, I guess one could call it.
Yeah, I guess
feel
so.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But it is, shit. Yeah. I can only imagine your dad with the 8-year-old just being like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, what are you talking about? Sit back down, watch the movie, Carl.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, it's like you said, this is going to be different for everybody. And, when you share that story, my mind automatically goes to, well, yeah, you're a 5720, that brainwave, that channel of intuitive knowing in the now. And that just, it makes so sense that that would be part of your process as a splenic person, being really into that intuitive, no idea where this comes from, this futuristic gate, just like now, you know? Yeah, it's interesting. And I'm just so fascinated by the splenic authority because I don't have a defined spleen, right? I only have that dormant 28 where it's like, yep, fear of death in my Pluto, lifelong lesson, never gonna understand it if maybe perhaps. But and then I have a lot of pressure on my spleen. I have that 54 pressure, I have that 10 pressure, and just really understanding that my my fears are going to be different than someone who has a defined spleen, right? Because it's just, for me, it's really the not self that's just like, oh, like you said, I wish I had that other side. I wish I had that other side. But I think it's just one of those centers that it still is very like, I get the mechanics, I get the jargon around it, I get the whole, but grasping it is so different. And I also have my husband who has a very defined spleen. He's a perfected form and a channel of struggle. And so it's like, and he's got a whole bunch of gates just hanging out there. And so it's just like, oh, but how does this work? So I just appreciate you sharing your process around that. And anybody listening with the splenic authority is like, maybe you have the similar experience, or maybe your experience is completely different. And that is the science of differentiation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like even bringing it, like I think through this conversation, bringing it into this light of corporate culture or work culture in general, there's like, I think what maybe maybe people who don't know that much about human design, like there's a lot of energy in the chart or in a body graph that aligns really well, like you said, with the quote unquote high performer energy or what we traditionally look for or accept in the work culture and how people show up and how people contribute. And then there's so much in the chart that is not traditionally looked at or sought out or appreciated in the work culture. And, I think about the two line, like we said earlier, the talent and even the spleen with the intuition and the random, or the freak to genius channel, like these things that just are unexplainable and don't have this reasoning of like, well, because of this and this and this, that's why we end up here. Like, no, there is no backstory. It just comes. So, when you think about perhaps a boss and an employee having the freak to genius, but the boss doesn't, is that boss really going to give the employee the opportunity to say, that's like an interesting insight. Maybe we should explore that. It takes quite a boss and quite a leader to do that. So I just think about I don't want to, maybe oppression is the strong word for this, but in a way it kind of feels like oppression. It kind of feels like a missed opportunity, maybe is a different framing of it, that there is like such a missed opportunity again with so many gifts that lie in all of our designs, all the humans on this planet that we're not leveraging to make whatever the mission of your organization is, it really is a missed opportunity. Yeah.
I love that reframe because I agree. It is wholeheartedly a missed opportunity. And any corporate industry, business, small or large or medium sized, who is actually actively trying to beat the market in some way, because that's usually part of the strategy, right?
Mhm.
Any organization out there is always having a strategy of this is our goal. Let's figure this out through this strategy. It's like incorporate human design into your strategy and see where that will take you, because you will have a one up on your competitors. You'll have a one up in the market, and it's going to be worth the investment of actually understanding it.
Mm-hmm. It really is worth it. And it's worth the risk of, oh, this person doesn't act the way that I'm expecting. Oh, how come they haven't shown up to work for 2 weeks? Yeah, there was something on LinkedIn actually recently. It was from, I think, idealist.org. And they put out a poll that said, would you rather work 4 days a week, so have a 4-day work week, or would you rather work for 2 months straight, 5 days a week, and then have a month off and keep doing that cycle throughout the year? And I, of course, hit 2 months on and 1 month off.
Yeah,
And right, that's like so much more aligned for a manifester. But what's interesting is I think it was at the time that I entered the poll, it was probably like 700 people answered it. And you would find out 30% picked the one that I picked, about 70% picked the 4-day work week, which I was like, hello, this is sacral and non-sacral right there with like 8 people answering the poll. Like it was so fascinating that it lined up so perfectly, right?
That is insane. That is so insane. Absolutely. Oh my God. But this is where it's so much fun when you can see the mechanics playing out. Like the logic of it. It's like, yeah, 70% would love a 4-day work week and then a long weekend and then go back to work. The rest of us, no, thank you.
Exactly. 2 months on, like, yeah, especially maybe with a defined heart. I'm like, yeah, let's do this. 2 months on, 1 month off. Perfect.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, I
And
love that
someone
so
I was
much.
talking to, I was talking to a manifesting generator friend of mine, and he was like, what's your ideal day? Like if you could have money and time is not even an issue, like what's your ideal day? And I attempted to answer, but then, and then he took his time to answer. But then I was like, but really, to be honest, I would have an ideal year. Like to me, it's not because we're not working on daily cycles as manifestors. To me, I was like, I would love to basically just rest and chill and do whatever the hell I want to do for the year. And then I have like 3 or 4 big events, like 3 or 4 big, whether I'm launching a workshop or giving a talk at a conference or traveling somewhere. Like I would just want 3 or 4 little, not little, but maybe big-ish things that I'm putting myself out there, bringing my manifestor 2-5 energy out there. And then I come back home and I pet my dog and I eat chips and I watch movies and maybe garden, That's really the majority of the year.
I love
That is
that.
interesting.
And I agree. I would also be more in that inclined to do the whole year thing than a day thing because it's like, and for me, it's like, well, I don't know what my mood's going to be like that day. It's like
Right.
totally depending on where my mood is. Do I feel like doing this or do I not feel like doing this, you know? And I just put on a conference here in Norway in April.
Oh, cool.
It was a human design conference and it was amazing. So much fun. So much work because it was the first one ever. So I didn't know what I needed help with, and asking for help as a manifestor is really hard. Really hard. But I was just in that same headspace of when I was done with that, was like, if I could do something like this 4 times a year and just make my money off of those 4 things and then, bring the impact, bring the mood, and then go home and relax and go for walks, go climbing with my husband, lay on the couch, and then burst of energy. Let's go again. Let's do a retreat, or let's do another big, conference kind of thing or festival. And then
Yeah.
it would be perfect. And one day, maybe that will be my life.
Yeah. I will wish that for you, and I will wish that for myself too.
I agree. We both have what's called possibility view, if I saw your variables
Yes.
correctly.
Mhm.
And so it's just like, you never know. There's a possibility. I'm going to live in that Pollyanna hope.
Absolutely. Same here. I'm with you.
I'm feeling a bit complete, but is there anything you would love to, a message you would like to end on, anything you feel like we didn't touch on, something you would like to share?
Mm, I mean, we've been talking about kind of human design meets, corporate world a bit, and I particularly there's a specific kind of area that I've been contemplating a lot, and I'm working on building some programming around right now because of my background in social change and systems change work. I'm starting to observe and do some research around what are the gifts that we all have that show up in social change work and systems change work. Um, and sometimes it means, yes, in organizations, but in a different lens of like, um, when it comes to social change, there's so many ways that people can contribute. And part of that could be the advocate, the researcher, the historian, the networker, right? These are like concepts that really support when you meet so many different people from social change, everyone contributes in their own unique way. And I'm kind of starting to merge human design with those kinds of contributions and roles. And I'm super excited about it because they're like my 2 passions right now that I get to merge together. And I think that the social change sphere of working with like social enterprises, even some consultancies, nonprofits and charities, and even grassroots organizations, and even activist groups, I think there's probably far more of an opening to experiment with this kind of thing than going straight to like kind of for-profit culture and organizations. Like some totally might be, which is amazing. But I can imagine that there's a lot of this openness in these types of spheres. So I'm starting to experiment with that and, going beyond type, like going into the channels and going into the profiles, as we said earlier. So, yeah, it's just kind of a thing that I was interested in talking about and building programming about and thinking about like manifestors. So there's this someone named Matthew Manos. I believe he's American. but he created this little, I'm going to call it a zine, called the Preemptive Social Enterprise. And it like totally validated things that I had been thinking at the time. I forget, this probably came out in 2015 or so. And it basically is this idea that in social change work, people create charities and nonprofits and social enterprises almost always exclusively out of a reaction to a problem that we see in society. So there's a homeless shelter that was built because there's already homeless people on the street, right? There are campaigns against gun violence because people have already died from guns, right? It's because of this negative thing that has happened. Therefore, there's a reaction and a response to address the challenges. And I think about the role of manifestors in the realm of social change. And I think about the idea of preemptively creating a better vision for the future and working and initiating the building of that rather than, and I don't know that this is my theory yet, but it just seems like a convenient theory that majority of the response and then majority of the world is a sacral population that responds. And so I think about that kind of like, oh, is this a coincidence? Like, maybe not. Maybe it is the role of manifestors to say, okay, if I want a better world, then how can I initiate that? Rather than me responding to gun violence, me responding to, oh, there's funding here for gender equality. Now there's funding here, right? Like not following where the money goes, but saying, this is what I creatively urge, the creative urge that comes for a better world. I want to create this. And it's not out of necessarily response, at least not on a mental level. So yeah, that's like stuff that I'm contemplating with that are like unfinished thoughts, but I just wanted to talk about that a little
I
bit.
love that. And I know that's been my response to everything you say almost, but seriously, that is such a great reframe of that, social injustice kind of work where it's like, oh, but this happened. So in response, this is what we're going to do. But
Mm-hmm.
switching the narrative over to, well, I don't need there to be a disaster to happen to create this better world for people. And this feels
Mm-hmm.
so channel of judgment to me. It's like, I can like, yep, I see that. I see that. And your incarnation cross with that gate 53. Let's start something new. Let's just get it going. It's like,
Yeah.
it feels so aligned with who you are in your design. And I just absolutely love that. And
Thank
is that
you.
something you need help with? Is there people that are listening to this that are just like, yes, yes, yes. How can they contact you and help you create this?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I would love support. Thank you for that opportunity. I didn't even plan that or think about that. But yeah, that's um I would love support. Yeah, if anyone wants to brainstorm it with me, if anyone has knowledge of human design, I would love that support. If someone doesn't have knowledge of human design but has skill sets, I would love, yeah, support with that. Thank you, Jessica.
Awesome. I hope this reaches a lot of people and that people can reach out to you because that would be so cool. Yes, indeed.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that. I also know that you do human design readings. Like,
Mhm.
how can people work with you on the level of they want to learn more about their human design, they want to learn more about their role here on this planet through this lens? How does that work with you?
Yeah, people can either go to my website directly, which is expansiveevolution.com, or people can go to my Instagram, also expansive.evolution. I am pretty much everywhere. I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn. LinkedIn, you would have to find my actual name. So that's Emmy Hosotsuji, which I'm sure you'll see in the show notes somewhere. But yeah, happy to do one-on-one introductory level readings for people who are brand new to human design. And I'm starting to offer team workshops as well. I have one nonprofit that I'm working with right now to offer some team human design workshops. So yeah.
Absolutely so cool. I will definitely put everything that's needed in order to get in contact with you in the show notes. And thank you so much, Emmy, for showing up and having this conversation with me. I had so much fun. This is, I think this is going to impact a lot of people. And let's just pray and hope that the right people can hear it who are in the corporate world, but also the people that can help you build what you're creating, because I think that would be pretty amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to be here and get to know you, Jessica, and I look forward to getting to know you more.